the free press as we know it is dead. Guys, we are literally watching the president of the United States of America get blackmailed in real time, like right in front of our faces. There's so much information out there. There's so much underlying intent behind what's going on right below our noses. And yet, virtually no coverage on mainstream media of the crap that matters, okay? The way that mainstream media has been whitewashing these Epstein files, and particularly Trump's involvement and his relationship with Epstein, and who the F Epstein really was, and also what happened to Epstein, okay? There's so much verified information out there. The fact that it's not being talked about openly really draws into question what the heck has happened to the concept of American free press, the very ethics of journalism itself. None of this is news to us, right? If Barry Weiss's no-name Substack is capable of being sold for hundreds of millions of dollars with like 2 likes, okay, per post. And then she gets placed as the head of one of the largest legacy media conglomerates, okay, in American history by virtue of being possibly the worst editor that the New York Times has ever seen and being ultimately talentless and ruthlessly unethical, not only as a journalist, but just as a human being, okay? I can personally attest that I had sent dozens of op-eds to Barry Weiss over the course of her being the op-ed editor at New York Times. Every single one of those op-eds that were submitted were rejected by her. I'm sure you can guess why. To see the types of shady characters that are being tapped to literally run American media, to run our newsrooms, you know, just using her as an example, the way that she has been gutting her newsroom, the way that her very own journalists are ringing the alarms internally, goes to show that we are in crisis. American media, American press, the entire journalistic landscape is in absolute crisis. And these Epstein files has made that absolutely clear. Welcome back to Amani on Air. For those that are tuning in on YouTube or Spotify, you can see that we are taping remotely today. Your girl is currently traveling. I just graduated from Oxford last week. So I wanted to make sure that we get this dispatch over to you guys, because what a tremendous week it has been. Obviously, the number one topic that everybody is talking about right now are these Epstein files. We've already had a trickle of some extremely entertaining emails come out. And if there's more where that came from, I am completely getting my popcorn ready, because honestly, America's political theater is better than freaking House of Cards or whatever other Netflix show you want to fill in the blank with, because you cannot write scripts like this. So where do I even begin? I mean, by now, I'm sure you've all seen many of the most questionable / hilarious emails that have come out in this latest leak. But obviously, we have just voted to release the entire file that I guess Trump had originally denied even existed. So we're in for a show. It's also pretty hilarious that after that appetizer that we got, Trump suddenly changed his tune from these Epstein files don't exist to go ahead and release the entire shebang. I can't help but feel like Trump's mindset is like, well, if I'm going down, you're all going down with me. Because even based off of just some of the names that were mentioned in some of these emails so far, we're talking about the most powerful and influential men on the planet. And spoiler alert, they're literally all pedophiles. They are nasty freaks, and not the good kind at all. It's actually quite disgusting. And that's why I'm just like, when I'm thinking about this current climate that we all exist in, when I'm thinking about the communities that I represent and that I'm protective over, when I think about our marginalized communities that are all interconnected, I can't help but think like, look, the entire system is in the crapper. Our countries are being run not by the most moral, the most ethical, the best leaders that we have to offer. No, they're actually being run by scum. They don't have our best interests at heart. Obviously, we've always known that as marginalized people, right? But now I'm just like, if the entire system is in the crapper already, if these leaders that we're like pandering to, you know, represent us, to hear us, to fight for our rights, are all imbeciles, literally the bottom feeders of what our societies have to offer, then the only thing that I can say for us, for our communities, is we have to look out for ourselves and we have to look out for each other, because they damn sure as hell aren't going to do that for us, okay? We have to be smart. All we should care about right now, like, forget Democrat and Republican, left, right, conservative, liberal, like, none of that even matters. This is truly about survival right now. We are living in a very fascist era. I genuinely hate that when we finally had like the pendulum swing in the favor of marginalized people, of minorities, suddenly it got typecast as like wokeness. And then that got like labeled as something bad. And it started becoming synonymous with a cancel culture that was hell-bent on political correctness rather than substance and the merit of actually making significant change. It really bothers me as a media founder, as somebody who was on the front lines of that movement. I think I would say it really took off in 2016 after Trump first got elected. You know, soon after we saw the Women's March and many other milestone moments. Not to say that the Women's March was ideal. It really served one group of women more than any other, as we know in retrospect. But being in the media space during that time and during this time, it really makes you feel jaded in a lot of ways, because when it was this like woke era and everyone was talking about diversity and inclusivity and stuff like that, one of our biggest concerns at that time was that we would be treated like we're just a trending hashtag, and that once the glow of all of the spotlight passed, then no one is really going to care about our empowerment anymore. And I can personally speak to the movement for Muslim women. Muslim Girl was central to rebranding the image of Muslim women in American media and mainstream media globally. We shifted this perception of Muslim women as being this oppressed, silenced minority or aggressive, angry women that are hidden behind headscarves and face veils, that are always getting spoken over or about, and shifted that to Muslim women being effing badass and having autonomy and being stylish and chic and modern. And honestly, equally problematic, right? I mean, there are two extreme ends to a spectrum that both in their own way homogenize Muslim women, right? Because, and also kind of play to these like Western standards of what an empowered woman looks like, which is something that we always try to undermine and fight back against, because as we know, the number one way to dehumanize a group of people is to homogenize them into one group of the same. And sure enough, our concerns became true, right? Now that woke is out, and now that fascism has literally become normalized in our society under this Trump administration, suddenly, you know, and now that Trump has kind of been on the attack of DE&I and all of these initiatives that took many years to implement and to establish, to kind of attempt to balance the scales for those of us that have been systematically outcasted for so long. Now that DEI is out, fascism is in, you know, it's true. A lot of media just fell in step. They fell in line with that calling. And it is very heartbreaking. You know, like, we dedicated so much energy and time to building up this kind of inclusivity across the board. And to see that all of that wasn't really authentic. You know, it wasn't really because of an authentic concern for our communities or caring about representing us. It was more so tapping into the numbers, because having a hijabi face in your campaign suddenly got you far more attention than not, right? So I'm just a little disappointed. I will say that as a media founder, I expected better from a lot of people in the industry. I guess that then makes it no surprise that the current state of the media industry is so shit. I first clocked that I really wanted to talk about this on this podcast when it was announced a couple of weeks ago that Teen Vogue is being folded up and basically absorbed by Vogue US. Teen Vogue, for those that don't know, is its own publication at Condé Nast that is primarily focused on Gen Z, Gen Alpha. Maybe like 10 years ago, it's like the millennials that it was focused on. Basically, it's very youth-driven, youth-focused. And it really set itself apart and made a name for itself because it became political, especially after 2016, especially when Trump first got elected. That was when Teen Vogue really asserted itself in the role of needing to keep young people, especially young women, informed about their rights, about what's going on in the world around them. It also created a space where more young women felt empowered to speak up for the experiences that they were having, to reclaim their narrative in the media, to fight back through the pen, through the written word, through media, on the issues that mattered the most to us. And it was through Teen Vogue that Muslim Girl really started to establish a space for Muslim women. I was tapped to be part of the cover story of Teen Vogue. I was photographed for the print issue that was like the new faces of feminism. And it was something I was extremely proud of. And it made a lot of headlines at the time. It made a huge splash. And actually, one of the very first profiles, if not the first real mainstream media profile that was ever written about me, was in Teen Vogue. And it went viral. And it was because of that reason that I was tapped to be in the print issue. And it was in large part because of that early coverage from Teen Vogue that we then landed a profile in the New York Times, which led to us catapulting into becoming our own media company. And the rest is history. Shortly after that, Muslim Girl became the first Muslim-founded company ever to land on Forbes 30 Under 30, and a series of accolades after that, and established Muslim Girl as the most influential media platform that we have for the Muslim community. And now it is quite apparent that it is because of this attempt to censor and to depoliticize this woke young generation, this new generation that's coming up that is very eager to be informed and share information and look past traditional media headlines, that Teen Vogue is being folded up into Vogue US. And in that way, a lot of young people are going to lose the opportunity to speak for themselves, to have their own platform, and to really get as political, to push the envelope of getting as political as they want. All that to say is that there is clearly a trend where the American media industry, obviously UK industry as well, but I'm focused on the American industry right now, is really falling into line with marching orders with this fascist Trump administration. And history is not going to look favorably upon that at all. Our media industry is falling under occupation right now. The biggest thing that really shook me awake to wanting to talk about this week has been these Epstein emails. You would have to be super naive to not understand what's going on here. If there are emails like this, if even one of the slew of photographs that we assume exist actually do, we're in deep trouble as a country, because that in the political world is a death sentence. That's blackmail, that's leverage. That's how entire nations can fall under control. And unfortunately, that's what's happening right before our eyes over here. And the free press is the front lines to safeguard against that, okay? When our government is failing the people, it's the free press that is supposed to be fighting for the people. It's the free press that are supposed to be asking these questions. They're supposed to be covering the stories. They're supposed to be pushing forward against this status quo that's being bludgeoned down on our heads. And that's not what's happening here. That hasn't been happening for quite a while, if we're going to be honest about it. But the fact that it's not happening in this situation, it's no secret that the American people are vastly uneducated about our own civics, the way that civics works in America. I would even go as far as to say that the average American, if you ask them how many branches of government exist, wouldn't even be able to name them. So for a quick little 101 refresher of American politics, there are 3 branches of government, right? We have the executive, we have the legislator, and we have the judicial. Executive, obviously, the president, the legislator, House of Representatives and the Senate, and the judicial, which is the Supreme Court. Now, it has been widely understood that the unwritten 4th branch of the government is the press. The way the branches work is that there are a bunch of checks and balances. Checks and balances meaning like they're all supposed to be intertwined so that none can overpower the other. And the final frontier of that balance is the free press. They're the ones that are supposed to hold the line. Is that what's happening? Obviously not. And it is really, really upsetting. Again, as a media founder, as somebody who deeply believes in the power of media to liberate our voices, to empower us, to save lives even, especially in today's social media era, it is something I feel very passionately and deeply about, especially as a writer. You know, like my weapon of choice is the pen, and it always has been. And to see the way that the ink of people's pens, you know, within the free press, within the media industry are literally being dried up as we speak is really devastating and actually will hold far more long-term consequences than we even realize. That's why when things like this Barry Weiss sale, her being put in charge of an entire like legacy news network, when Teen Vogue is being swallowed up by a traditional title, when TikTok is being forced to sell to the US, these events deserve far more scrutiny and outrage from the American public than they've been getting. So a lot of people, unless they are very tapped in, very informed, are out seeking that information, maybe they're chronically online and they're following the right people on social media, would be oblivious to this. Just like how most people would be oblivious to what's really going on with these Epstein files. You know, like the one thing that's really shocking to me is understanding that Epstein was a foreign agent. I always assumed that that was a conspiracy theory or it was unfounded or like whatever, you know, some like hoo-ha. Why did I assume that? Because of the fact that it wasn't officially covered or reported in any way. Silly me, yet again. Why would it be covered by traditional media, right? But basically, it actually is very well verified that Epstein worked for a foreign government. This man literally ran one of the largest global pedophilia syndicates on the planet. And many people rightfully assume that the whole purpose of running that pedophilia ring was to get shit on the most powerful people in the world, who apparently are all freaking sexual deviants in the most disgusting way. Who would have thought? Maybe you only really ascend to those positions of power within the system if, in fact, you are somebody that subscribes to that kind of activity or behavior, because then there's something on you. You're like vetted that like, you know, we can control this person in some way. I don't know. If it has been, in fact, verified and is like common knowledge at this point that Epstein was a foreign agent, these emails that are being trickled out, literally, you didn't have to binge watch House of Cards or any of these other like Netflix political shows to know that's exactly what blackmail looks like, right? And that is a huge, a lot of leverage to have on arguably the most powerful person on the planet, which is the president of the United States of America. And the fact that American media has not been going hard on exposing that, on fighting back. Look, I don't even like Trump. I think President Trump is the biggest piece of shit on the planet right now. He is responsible for so much damage that's going to take decades for us to undo and heal from, especially to the American political system, especially to the Constitution, especially to like basic rights and principles that our country was founded on. Political science major over here, I digress. But aside from that, he is not somebody that I care for at all. Okay. And yet, even I, as a basic American citizen, I'm questioning, I'm like, how is our own media not up in arms about the fact that the president of our country is being blackmailed out in the open like this, and no one is pointing any fingers? No one is really like unpacking what it is that's going on here. No one is, I wouldn't even say courageous enough. I don't think that it necessitates courage. I think it just necessitates doing your job to dig into Epstein's connections. I'm going to call Aymann Ismail, who is a good friend of mine and who's also the president of AMIJA, Arab and Middle Eastern Journalists Association, biggest organization in the country for Middle Eastern journalists. I want to hear what he has to say about this.
Yeah, it gets tricky with the Epstein stuff because then I think like what's verified and what's conjecture. There could be like a lot of overlap, and certain news organizations are going to have certain standards about what gets covered and how it gets covered. I mean, there's no doubt that there's going to be a bias and there's an inflection on trying to protect the state of Israel as and the United States' relationship to that country. So I don't doubt that there's certain decisions being made behind the scenes that certain news editors are going to be made uncomfortable to draw that connection before it feels safe to do so. There's so many different news organizations that all have their own standards. Like CNN's standard for publishing things is not going to be the same as the New York Times, for example. But I think what you're getting at, I think, is true, is that there is like an unfelt, unseen pressure that's been really successful when it comes to like nonprofits like Camera and other nonprofit organizations that purport to try and protect the state of Israel from critical coverage, and they've been largely successful at making editors at large institutions afraid to be the first to draw these conclusions themselves.
At the expense of protecting our own president, our own government.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is the thing, right? We're not talking about like a conglomerate when we say media. We're talking about hundreds of editors who are not necessarily communicating with each other, who all have their own standards, who have their own ideals. But I think one of the things that have been like really successful with this like fear campaign, this pressure campaign to paint everything as that's anti-Israel, as anti-Semitic, one of the big successes there is that it's getting all of these people to doubt themselves and to be afraid of being the first. They might feel vulnerable. I've experienced it in my newsroom. I've talked to editors who also feel maybe we should just wait one more story. We should wait one more news cycle before we take up that position editorially.
Yeah.
So, that's what I mean. I don't buy into the idea that all of these organizations are inherently Zionist or inherently taking a position, but I do think I've seen it that these places might feel like they're self-censoring and they're being really cautious, overly cautious, I would say, when it comes to not wanting to offend, the sensibilities of people who run these nonprofits who only exist to protect the government of Israel. And they do it under the guise of protecting or trying to advocate for ethical reporting.
And, many people believe that the press, the free press, is the fourth branch of the government. It's literally the final frontier to protect the American people, from these types of trampling of power. As the president of the biggest organization for Arab journalists in the country, where does that leave us? Like, how do you feel about where, the current state of our newsrooms, the need for more possibly like independent media? I don't know. Like, what do you think about the current state of things?
It's a big question. I mean, I feel like when I think about when I first joined media over a decade ago, I would look around the industry and not see too many people who looked like me, who had names like me. And I felt like we were, there was like all of these unfair expectations being put upon us when it comes to how we were allowed to cover certain things, particularly Gaza and particularly the West Bank and Palestine. I hear what you're saying, and I think you're right. And I honestly agree with you that there's so much lacking and there's so much work to do. And it's so easy to look around and see the shortcomings and only focus on the shortcomings and think to yourself, this is not working. The position of a media and my position is going to always be, how do we help these newsrooms not make the same mistakes over and over again? We are, just because we're Arab, it doesn't mean that we have a bias. And just because we're Arab, it doesn't mean that we're also going to be experts on foreign policy. We're journalists like anybody else. So media has been trying to do their best to create reporting guides, to create networks, to make reporters more brave, to bring up these issues in the newsrooms and give them more of a backing so that they can accurately represent this pressure campaign as a pressure campaign with real ramifications on our abilities to tell stories truthfully and holistically. That being said, independent journalists and freelancers and independent media like the Young Turks, like Zateo, have a major role to play here. And because they're
like Muslim Girl.
Like, of course, that's one of the OGs. Gotta give them the flowers. But all of these independent media organizations aren't gonna feel that same threat in the same way when it comes from organizations like Canary Mission and Camera.
Totally.
So they have a major role to play. People are watching. People are listening. If you hit them with the truth, they're ready to hear it. I don't think we need to wait for the largest institutions in the country or in the world to report things accurately.
All right. Well, there you have it. I appreciate that Aymann has reminded us of the wins of really pushing back and fighting back in the media. And I will echo his sentiments. I think that with the emergence of a lot of new platforms, and like he said, independent media, as a media founder, I'm biased about that, but we really do need so many more of these voices that aren't being tied to, like he said, neutering themselves. And it is through independent media initiatives that we are able to kind of find those voices through all of the white noise. And the best part is that literally any individual in this day and age, in this economy, with today's technology, can become that platform, right? And that's why it's so important to protect our social media platforms and their independence as well. I mean, one of those platforms that I'm personally a really big fan of is the iHead podcast. I've had it. I am such a huge fan of Jennifer Welch. I think she's doing a phenomenal job. And she actually said something that really resonated with me about this whole coverage about the Epstein files. She compared it to the Bill Clinton impeachment, which that was before my time, but she had said that at that time, there was a lot of quote unquote pearl clutching around Monica Lewinsky and this sexual act that happened behind closed doors in the Oval Office and things like that. This is what Jen had to say.
We remember the pearl clutcher, prude family values people and the outrage that they had regarding Bill Clinton's infidelity with Monica Lewinsky. They impeached him for it in the House. And I want to keep that level of fight on what I'm calling blowjob mania. If this happened to any other president, it would be wall to wall, chyrons, everything else would be insignificant.
Basically, what I got from that is that there is clearly a political motive behind how the press, how the media industry reacts to certain sensational stories over others. And if you don't believe me about the sheer importance of independent media platforms, don't take my word for it. Listen to Netanyahu himself, because he very blatantly and openly talked about needing to fight these wars, aka his genocide, using the new weapons of the day. And to him, that means TikTok.
But we have to fight with the weapons that apply to the battlefields in which we're engaged. And the most important ones are the social media. And the most important purchase that is going on right now is TikTok.
It has never been more important for us to hold tech accountable, hold media accountable, and fight for our digital rights. And that absolutely means our freedom of speech online. Social media was for a brief, glowing, fleeting moment being celebrated as the answer to this type of politicalization of media by being a democratizing force for giving access to different perspectives and narratives and a sharing of information. And it is more important than ever for us to protect that and to protect our freedom of speech online, especially when that freedom of speech is being under attack in real life. And now for your favorite moment of the week, our Gaslight of the Week. This week, it goes to another familiar face on the Amani On Air show, and that is Mayor Eric Adams. Yeah. So remember when we talked about how Cuomo was saying that this is New York City mayor? What does it have to do with Gaza and Israel and international politics? And remember also when not too long ago, literally just a couple of weeks ago, when Zohran Mamdani was in the final leg of his contentious race, and every single media outlet was demanding that he comment on Israel, and he insisted that he's running for the mayor of New York City, and so he doesn't want to comment on Israel. And when he said that he's not interested in visiting Israel when he gets elected as mayor, he got under fire. How in the world would you not want to visit Israel as the mayor of New York City, right? And then on top of all of that, Mayor Adams had the absolute disgusting nerve to try to sick Islamophobia on Zohran Mamdani, just like he sicked the New York Police Department on unarmed, literal students on their college campuses for simply using their freedom of speech to protest. You know, remember when Eric Adams was saying that Islamic extremism in Europe and New York can't become like Europe? Okay, well, truly, what is the extremism here? Because apparently, as soon as he got ousted, Mayor Eric Adams' first priority was to fly where? No, not Turkey. Good guess. But straight to Israel, straight to the wall, and on this like Israeli media tour with the prime minister, with the president, and listen to what he had to say.
And as I finish, I wanted to come back here to Israel and let you know that I serve you as the mayor.
The fact that Eric Adams actually said the quiet part out loud. This is exactly what Zohran Mamdani was pushing back against in all of those debates, right? Eric Adams explicitly stated that as the mayor of New York City, he was serving Israel. Eric Adams literally said that as the mayor of New York City, he was serving a foreign country. I mean, anyone that saw the Z-Way interview with him, this comes as no surprise, right? As somebody in the comments said, he literally uses the name Israel as like his placeholder. Like how most of us say like or he says Israel. All right, let's go to the comments. Mashallah, this lady is the perfect combination of brilliance and beauty, and her name means peace in Swahili. Aww. That's really sweet. That's the first comment that I saw when I opened it up, and I don't usually expect positive comments like that. But yeah, Amani means peace in Swahili. It also means security in Farsi, and it means wish come true in Arabic. So those are 3 tenets that I've dedicated my life to. It's clear that this video is being targeted through algorithms because of the number of views. Yeah, honestly. I think that's expected. What can you do? That's literally the whole topic of what we're talking about here, right? That's why it's so important not only for us to create independent media, but to support independent media. How do you support independent media? Engage with it. Like, comment, subscribe, share, amplify, retweet, repost, all of that good stuff. You have a very important role to play. Somebody said, please, girl, just bite the bullet and draw in the unibrow. Oh my God, I just got like triggered back to like elementary school or something. Thanks a lot, Renee Chavez. Appreciate it. Human Rights Matt said, of course, international law is a byproduct of World War II in order for the new world order of the new colonist white Anglo-Saxons to control the world. Not only the international law, but every agreement they make with the global south, it's either to take over a specific country or to paralyze it. In the last podcast episode, I introduced you all to the concept of digital colonialism. And digital colonialism is, by extension, exactly what we see international law implementing. And it is very interesting because right now the United Nations is in the middle of creating first ever digital compact, which is the first global treaty or agreement specifically on the digital world. And so for us, Muslim Girl is a stakeholder on those conversations. We contribute to them regularly. And our main prerogative is to ensure that the same inequity and power imbalances that exist within international law, within the international community, aren't replicated through the digital world as well, and through the way that international law interacts with social media and the internet. So yeah, it's a very real threat. It's a very real concern. Oh, you guys loved the Josh Hammer exchange. Monkey Natty said he interrupts continuously and then has the final word. GTFO, never go on her platform again, girl. Listen, I will not deplatform myself, okay, unless they're putting me on there with somebody that is just like egregious. Honestly, it's like expected at this point. You know what I mean? You just got to like learn how to maneuver it. In my case, anytime he spoke over me, I just hit him back by talking over him. They didn't like that. They kept trying to stop me from doing that and let him do it. Yeah. Bishama said Josh is constantly talking over her so that people don't hear her point of view, and he looks appalled when the girl talks over him. What a hypocrite. If my role can be to piss off men like this, then so be it. I volunteer as tribute. Happy to do it. Oh, and thank you all so much for all the congratulations and love that you showed about me graduating from Oxford. I really appreciate that. It was not easy. That's all we got for today. See you next week right here on Amani On Air.